Lately, I've been seeing the exact same question in comment sections, forums, and tech groups. I'm on a budget. Should I buy the MacBook Neo or spring for the MacBook Air? And almost immediately, the comments start flowing. 8 gigabytes of RAM is dead on arrival. An A-series phone processor isn't going to last you 5 to 10 years. Don't waste your money, just buy the Air. Now, I get why people say that, but if you are buying one of these Macs for school or daily work, I think folks pushing you toward the Air might be looking at this completely wrong. Technology right now is in a crazy bananas place in terms of pricing, especially when it comes to computing. And when you drop this kind of money on a laptop, you certainly want your investment to last.
As of the most recent price increase, the base configuration of a Neo is $699, which puts it at roughly half the cost of the base MacBook Air. If you spec each one up a step, you are still roughly half the cost, and anything over that, the Air will start to eclipse the cost of the Neo, since it tops out at $799. But for the sake of this video, we'll look at the configurations that are around half, since if you are looking at a maxed out $3,500 Air, the Neo likely wouldn't even be on your radar. When someone asks, I need a laptop that will last 7 to 10 years, should I get a Neo or stretch my budget for an Air? The advice is almost always the same. Spend the extra money on the Air. It'll last longer. That's treating buying a laptop like signing a decade-long contract. But longevity shouldn't mean dragging the exact same piece of hardware across a 10-year finish line. Here's the issue nobody talks about. 7 to 10 years is an eternity in tech. Even if your Air survives to year 7, you're not using a modern machine anymore. You're sitting there with an outdated processor, a degraded battery, worn-out storage, loose hinges, and shine on every key.
But what if I told you there's a way better strategy? Let's do the math. Instead of dropping $1,300 today on an Air and forcing it to last the better part of a decade, you can buy the MacBook Neo for around half of the price, and then in 3.5 years or so, sell it and put that money toward the purchase of an updated Neo model. You'll end up with newer and more powerful hardware at the end for awfully darn close to the same price as the Air, even if you inflate the cost of the upgrade and sell the old one for a fraction of its value.
And this is with me stacking the deck against this strategy. I factored in a $100 price hike for the next-gen Neo and lowballed the original's trade-in at just $150. Even with me doing that, the math still holds up. If launch prices climb higher than expected, your resale value should boost right alongside, keeping the math balanced.
Now, it's also not unreasonable to think, okay, the math makes sense, but what about actual performance? Isn't the Neo just running on a cell phone processor?
It sure is. But think about what modern smartphone chips are doing right now. They're driving high-resolution displays, rendering ray-traced AAA games, and processing complex AI workloads, all inside a thin glass rectangle tucked in your pocket. Now, take that exact same silicon architecture and put it inside a laptop body. Suddenly you have massive thermal headroom with a larger chassis to dissipate heat, and that means even more sustained performance that a phone couldn't even dream of doing. Here's some real-world examples. And keep in mind, this is the Neo against the newest 15-inch Air with 32 gigabytes of RAM. In Basemark Web, the Neo scores are really close at 1,704 versus the Air at 1,920. In gaming, there's a fun little test I like to do in Roblox that I affectionately refer to as the cheese test. The game itself runs just as smoothly as the Air, and if I load up the game with an unrealistic number of objects to bog the processors down, you can see that they both struggle at nearly the same point, making the Neo just as capable of playing games. I've tested Cyberpunk, Resident Evil, and others in my first look video on the Neo, and it handled them all just fine. Take a look at that video if you want to see more. Finally, in productivity, I ran a GPU test in cycles on both, and here is where the Air has its advantage. Working on scenes is a very similar experience on both machines, but when it comes to rendering, even though the Neo can handle it, it is a fair bit slower than the Air. And this translates to most rendering tasks that you would do in apps like Final Cut, After Effects, or Photoshop. I had a surprisingly great experience editing content on the Neo. On paper, the Air technically has a better display for color accuracy, but in person? It's honestly hard to tell the difference. And realistically, if your job depends on color-critical work, you're probably looking at a MacBook Pro anyway.
So whether you're shopping for back to school, looking for a reliable machine for work and play, or even gearing up to launch your own YouTube channel, I hope this video gave you a perspective that makes sense for your wallet and your workflow. Thanks for stopping by the channel. I'll see you in the next one.